Sketches by Boz, by Charles Dickens. Dramatised for radio by Stephen Wyatt. Today's story, Love and Oysters.
The decrees of fate and the means by which they are brought about are mysterious and inscrutable. When Mr. John Dounce's whole social system was suddenly upset and turned completely topsy-turvy, the cause was not an earthquake or some other dreadful convulsion of nature, but through the simple agency of an oyster. Mr. John Dounce was a retired glove and braces maker, a widower resident in Cursitor Street off Chancery Lane.
Papa! Papa! Breakfast is ready!
He resided there with his two daughters, Rosa and Dora, both grown up, both unmarried.
Coming, my dears?
Mr. John Dounce was a short, round, large-faced, tubbish sort of man with a broad-brimmed hat and a square coat, and his life in retirement ran like clockwork upon well-established lines.
Excellent, Rosa. Excellent, Dora.
Every morning there was breakfast at 9 with his daughters, a discussion of the weather.
The sun is shining, Papa.
So I see, Rosa, so I see.
And a discussion of what was to be eaten for dinner.
I've told Clara to prepare a piece of boiled mutton, Pa.
Boiled mutton will be perfect, Dora.
After that, Mr. Dounce would dress and titivate a little, and then it was down to the Sir Somebody's Head for a glass of ale and the paper. His bosom companions there were Mr. Harris, the law stationer,
Good health, Dounce. And yours, Harris.
and Mr. Jones, the robe maker, a rum fellow in Mr. Dounce's words, but capital company.
Did I ever tell you the story of the milliner and the mousetrap?
No, Jones, I don't believe you ever did.
Well, this will make you laugh, Downs.
And on most occasions, it did. A great deal.
Good afternoon, Mrs. Weasel.
Good afternoon, Mrs. Weasel. Good afternoon, Mrs. Weasel.
After a glass of ale, Mr. Dounce would return home and take his daughters out for a walk. After dinner, a glass of grog and a pipe, then a nap. Then, tea.
Capital T, girls.
Indeed, Pa. No doubt of it, Pa.
And then, off to the Sir Somebody's Head again, with Mr. Harris
To my good friend, Dounce.
and the waggish Mr. Jones.
Tell me, Downs, did you ever hear the one about the beadle and the loaf of bread?
You know, Jones, I don't believe I ever did.
Then, having enjoyed this capital company and wealth of humorous anecdote, whilst drinking brandy and water and smoking his pipe, Mr. John Dounce would make his way home to sleep the sleep of the just until...
Papa! 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 Breakfast is ready!
You will perhaps get the picture. But to the oyster, and to the particular night upon which the oyster played its fatal role, it was Mr. Harris's birthday.
55, I can't believe it.
Cheer up. You don't look a day over 90, Harris.
I wish I could return the compliment, Jones.
Come, gentlemen, no acrimony. I'm older than either of you.
You don't seem it, Downs.
And why is that? Because I lead a sensible, regular life, yet still know how to enjoy myself.
You're an inspiration to us, Downs.
So I propose a special celebration tonight. You know what, my friends? Barney the Vampire is playing at Covent Garden.
Barney the Vampire, now you're talking.
Followed by Deaf as a Post.
Deaf as a post!
Listen, Harris, I'll treat you for your birthday.
And I'll treat us all for supper after.
Oh, then that's settled.
Varney the Vampire was everything a gentleman could wish for a birthday celebration. Gore, trapdoors, and a heroine in extremis rescued just in time. Between the acts, Mr. Dounce and Mr. Harris and Mr. Jones stood up and looked round the house.
See over there in that box?
Where?
Over there. That's the celebrated Lady Dimpleton.
Ah.
And Mr. Dance brushed his hair and adjusted his neck handkerchief and inspected the celebrated Lady Dimpleton through an immense glass.
Right. A very fine woman, eh, Harris?
Very fine.
Yeah, though there might be a little more of her, if you know what I mean, eh, Jones?
It will be noticed that in his heart of hearts, Mr. Dance saw himself not just as a good old boy, but something of a ladies' man. After the performance, the three gentlemen retired, somewhat elated, to a nearby hostelry, where they had a brace of partridges for supper, preceded by a brace of glasses of brandy and water before, and a brace of glasses afterwards. During all this, Mr. Jones became more than ordinarily amusing.
I saw you know, Dance, you sly dog.
What are you talking about?
Exchanging glances with a lady in the white feathers in one of the pit boxes.
Oh, what lady might that be?
Oh, a very handsome lady for her years. And she gazed at our Mr. Dance all evening. She couldn't take her eyes off him.
Really, Jones, you're imagining things.
Oh, no, I'm not. And I saw you too, you crafty old boy, when you thought no one was looking at you.
What was he doing?
Only bestowing ardent looks of intense devotion on the lady in the white feathers in return.
I was doing nothing of the sort.
I don't believe you.
Me neither.
No, I insist. Mind you, I'm not saying that the time has been when I might have done such things.
You see, Harris, our Mr. Dance is a sly dog.
A very sly dog.
Oh, no, nonsense, Harris. Do I expect you've been a sly dog, too?
Oh, no.
And as for you, Jones...
What about me?
Well, I'm prepared to wager that you've been the slyest dog of all.
Not as sly as you.
Let's face it, sirs, we're all sly dogs.
And so we come to the oyster. Now, whether it was the sight of Lady Dimpleton, or memories of the fashionable ladies of his youth, or Mr. Jones's teasing, it is not easy to say. It was late, after all, and he was long overdue back home in Cursitor Street. But whatever the reason, Mr. Dance suddenly found his eyes resting on a newly opened oyster shop.
My.
It was many years since Mr. John Dance had hankered after an oyster, and many years since he had even consumed one. But on this particular occasion, Mr. Dance hankered after an oyster as he had never hankered before. Mr. Dance entered the shop.
Good evening. Is anybody there?
Good evening, sir. How may I help you?
Behind the barrels in the shop was a young lady of about 25, all in blue and all alone.
Good evening, my dear.
And good evening to you, sir.
The sly dog sort of feeling came strongly upon Mr. Dance when he viewed the young lady, lingering with a very oyster-like bashfulness behind the oyster barrels.
Can you open me an oyster, my dear?
I dare say I can, sir. Here you are, sir.
Oh, delicious, my dear. Truly delicious.
Thank you, sir.
Do you think, my dear, you could open me another?
Dare say I can, sir. There.
Oh, it's wonderful, my dear. Such memories it brings back. I wonder
Yes, sir?
whether you could possibly open me another.
Of course, sir. Dare say I can.
No, on second thoughts, open me half a dozen more.
Very good, sir.
Within no time at all, Mr. Dance had consumed a dozen oysters at 8 pence. But still he was not satisfied. And the young lady in blue watched him from beneath her enchanting ringlets.
Any more, sir?
Oh, yes. Half a dozen, my dear.
And he squeezed her hand. In a very paternal fashion, of course.
Oh.
Perfection.
I'm glad you like 'em, sir.
Tell me, my dear, what's your name?
Fanny, sir.
Well, Fanny, I don't suppose you could manage me a glass of brandy and water, could you?
I'll see what I can do, sir.
And away she ran, out of the shop and down the street, her long auburn ringlets shaking in the wind in the most enchanting manner. Soon she was back again, tripping over the coal cellar lids like a whipping top.
Here you are, sir. A tumbler of brandy and water.
Oh, thank you, my dear. It's a wonderful service. Perhaps you'd like to join me, my dear.
Oh, I couldn't.
What nonsense, you deserve it.
But it wouldn't be right, sir.
Oh, balderdash, my dear. Brandy and water is regular ladies' grog. Hot, strong, and plenty of it.
Mr. Dance walked home in a trance. How far this trance was caused by brandy and water, how far it was inspired by oysters, and how far it was the result of spending time in the company of the delightful young lady in blue with the ringlets, cannot at this distance be rightly determined.
Pa?
Oh!
Pa, is that you?
We've been worried sick.
We didn't know where you were.
You said you'd be back hours ago.
Where were you?
Good evening, girls.
You're drunk.
Very drunk.
Well, what does it matter as long as you're happy?
Oh, Pa!
Don't worry. I'm not hurt. I'm wonderful.
That night, Mr. Dance dreamed strange dreams. He dreamt of his first wife, mother of his daughters, and his second wife, and the young lady with ringlets, and disinterested attachments. All in all, he slept sound, very sound.
Pa! Pa! It's 9:45, Pa! Your breakfast is cold! Pa!
Oh, what? Oh. Coming. Oh.
The atmosphere at breakfast was frigid. Little was said.
Pass the butter, could you, Rosa, my dear? Oh, my head.
After his late breakfast, it was time for a breath of fresh air, of which Mr. Dance had great need. He did, of course, look in at the Sir Somebody's head.
A wonderful night we had of it, eh, Down?
Can't wait to do it all over again.
Oh.
Sooner than usual, Mr. Dance was back on the street. Now, tradition demanded he returned home to the bosom of his family, but he remembered the breakfast sulks and the slammed-down butter dish, and besides, he was still feeling rather feverish from the previous night. So, partly in the hope of cooling himself with an oyster, and partly with the view of ascertaining whether he owed the young lady anything or not, he went back to the oyster shop.
Why, good afternoon, sir.
Oh, and good afternoon to you, my dear.
A further view of the entrancing ringlets for a moment deprived Mr. Dance of speech. But the young lady was equal to the occasion.
Would you be after wanting anything, sir?
Yes. Open me a dozen oysters.
He worried that he might have acted over-boldly the night before, but there was only welcome in the young lady's eyes, and not a whisper of the reproach so strong in the eyes of his daughters.
Would you like me to fetch you some brandy and water?
Not just now. But come, my dear, come and sit with me.
I'm not sure I should, sir.
Oh, nonsense. You're perfectly safe.
Oh, I believe you, sir. You can tell that you're a gentleman.
Indeed I am, by God. Come on. Don't be frightened. Now, before we go any further, I don't owe you anything from last night?
Oh, no, sir. You don't owe me anything.
You see, I was a little merry.
I'd never have noticed, sir. Some of the younger gentlemen can become a little bold, but not you. Your manners were lovely.
Well, that's good to know. Fanny.
See, you remembered my name.
And did I tell you mine?
Not so that I can recall.
I am John. John Dance.
John is my favourite name.
Oh.
The more Mr. Dance sat there, the more soothing it seemed, and the less inclined he felt to head for home. He found himself making inquiries which, under less relaxed circumstances, might have seemed a little impertinent.
So tell me, Fanny, are you engaged?
Oh, no, Mr. Dance. I can't bear men. They're all such deceivers.
All men?
That's been my experience, yes.
Oh, when you talk like this, you wouldn't by any chance be thinking of very young men, would you?
My Mr. Dance, you'll make me blush.
No, my dear, don't take on so. There's no need to be embarrassed. After all, I'm old enough to be your father.
You don't seem so.
I don't?
Oh, no, sir. Not that I mean any disrespect to my dear, beloved, late lamented father.
Oh, your father's dead?
Alas, yes, Mr. Dance. I live with my aged widowed mother, and my little sister, and my little brother, whom we sometimes think is not long for this world. We get by, but times is hard.
Oh, it must be difficult for you to manage.
Oh, it is, sir. I mean, I'm ever so thankful for my job here, but the unwanted attentions of the young men are so very difficult to bear.
Oh, you're a sensitive creature, Fanny, I can see that.
Oh, I am, sir. I am.
You know, Fanny, we'll have to see if something can be done to help you.
That night in the Sir Somebody's Head, Mr. Dance was unusually thoughtful. The idyll of the oyster bar still filled his head.
Penny for them, Downs?
You look like you've got it bad.
Got what bad?
A stomachache.
Oh, no, he's not got the stomachache. He's in love.
In love. Yes, that's it, you sly dog.
Sly dog.
Sly dog. Sly
I
dog.
don't know what there is to laugh at.
Dance. You aren't in love, are you?
Of course I'm not.
Not that lady you made eyes at the theatre.
Oh, don't be absurd. But even if I did ever happen to be in love, it's really no business of yours.
But it was just a joke.
What do you mean? It was just a joke.
Well, that lady in the theatre, she really wasn't looking at you at all.
So you thought it amusing to pretend to me that she was?
Well, yes. And why not? You like to think of yourself as a sly old boy, don't you?
It's just a bit of teasing, Dance.
Well, I don't find it amusing. In fact, I seriously wonder if you two gentlemen have any understanding of the finer feelings.
You wouldn't let a joke about a woman come between us.
You wouldn't spoil our fun.
Well, never mind what I would or wouldn't do. I bid you gentlemen good night.
Pa, is that you? Pa!
Back in Cursiter Street, Miss Rosa and Miss Dora Dance lay in wait.
Pa,
Where have you been?
We've been so worried.
We couldn't go out this afternoon because of you.
We hate missing our walk.
We're used to our walk. I'm sure everyone in the neighbourhood is commenting upon our absence.
They'll be saying all sorts of spiteful
It
things.
really is very selfish of you, Pa.
Have you been drinking again?
Well, have you?
Oh,
Pa, come back.
Pa! You can't walk out like that! Pa!
Pa!
Perhaps it is not so surprising that Mr. John Dounce walked swiftly away. He was a man of regular habits and even disposition, but
enough is enough, by God.
his friends seemed ill-mannered and insensitive. His daughters seemed determined to punish the least deviation from long-established domestic rituals. Perhaps it's not surprising that sometime later he sought once again the consolation of half a dozen oysters.
Why, Mr. Dounce.
Good afternoon, Fanny. Here. These are for you.
Oh, Mr. Dounce, really, you shouldn't. They're wonderful.
But what?
Well, I hope this doesn't mean you think badly of me, Mr. Dounce.
Well, I don't understand.
Well, you might think I was to be bought, if you know what I mean.
Oh, good heavens, no. The very idea. I bring you flowers because, well, I like to see happy, welcoming faces, and I don't seem to get too many opportunities these days.
So you don't expect anything in return?
No, not at all. Except half a dozen of your best oysters.
Of course, Mr. Dounce. Yours for 18 pence.
Oh. Do you know something, Fanny?
What, Mr. Dounce?
You remind me of my dear first wife.
Do I?
Oh, yes. The resemblance is striking.
From that time forward, a change came over the spirit of Mr. John Dounce. He bought shirt pins, wore a ring on his third finger.
Now, Mr. Dounce, adopt an aristocratic air.
He even bribed a cheap miniature painter to perpetrate a faint resemblance to a youthful face.
And think poetic.
His portrait had a curtain over his head, 6 large books in the background, and an open country in the distance.
Oh, Mr. Dounce, it's lovely. Who is it?
Miss Fanny was the fortunate receiver of any number of gifts of increasing value.
Oh, Mr. Dounce, you shouldn't.
But I want to.
Just remember, don't think cheaply of me.
Oh, I assure you, I have the highest opinion and the most honourable intentions.
Then I accept. You were right, you know, Mr. Dounce. It was the young men I couldn't abide.
In Cursitor Street, however, matters reached crisis point. The Mrs. Dounce had made inquiries, and the inquiries were not to their liking. They feared the worst, and, like most people who fear the worst, made it more likely to happen by their own efforts.
It's too bad of you, Pa.
We should have guessed.
When you bought that ring.
And that book of poetry.
And asked us if we thought you resembled the late Lord Byron.
But we trusted you.
And she's just a little good for nothing.
Out for what she can get.
And selling oysters.
Ugh!
I'm sorry you have taken against this delightful young woman without even meeting her.
Oh, surely, Pa, you wouldn't expect us to meet her.
An oyster girl? Ugh!
At that moment, Mr. John Dounce took a deep breath and made a momentous decision.
As a matter of fact, girls, I might ask you to do more than that.
You don't mean...
I would not presume to interpret her feelings without actually asking her, but I do believe that it is more than possible that she would be prepared to be the third Mrs. Dounce.
Oh! She's just interested in your money, Pa.
And the presents you give her.
We've heard all about them.
She's just leading you on.
Now, there you're wrong. Fanny is the quintessence of modesty.
Fanny? Oh!
And if you don't want to receive her...
Yes?
Then you'd better take a small allowance each and go elsewhere.
Ah!
The Miss Dounces left Cursitor Street the next day. Nor were Mr. Jones and Mr. Harris much more appreciative of his plans.
You can't be serious.
Flirting with an oyster girl, well, that's one thing, but marrying her... Sly dogs don't do things like that.
They certainly don't.
Well, this one does.
The result was that Mr. Dounce cut his old fellows, abandoned the Sir Something's head, and attached himself solely to the modest young lady at the smart oyster shop.
Is anything the matter, Mr. Dounce?
No, it's just that people are so very prejudiced.
In what way?
Well, it's been the same with my daughters and with my so-called friends. They just won't accept that I want to take you for richer, for poorer.
What did you say, Mr. Dounce?
I want to marry you.
What?
You know that, don't you?
I most certainly do not.
But all our little chats, all my little gifts.
Tributes to my goodness, Mr. D. You told me so yourself.
Yes, but...
No buts, Mr. D. Have I ever said I would marry you?
Well, not in so many words, no. But...
Well, I ain't a-going to marry you.
But I thought...
Never mind what you thought.
But the earrings, the brooches, the picture...
You can take that back.
Oh, and the rest...
They were gifts, weren't they?
Yes, but you let me believe...
Believe what you like, Mr. Dounce. I wouldn't have you at any price.
Oh, but Fanny, after all that's passed between us...
You know what, Mr. D?
What?
You're only good for one thing, and that's eating oysters.
Oh!
It took Mr. Dounce no inconsiderable effort to persuade his daughters to forgive him and return to Cursitor Street. Even then, there was an air of perpetual disapproval over the breakfast table.
Pa, pray don't bolt your food so.
It all comes of not getting up bright and early as you should.
Yes, Rosa. Of course, Dora.
Mr. Jones and Mr. Harris also took him back into their acquaintance, but there was a general feeling that he was no longer a sly dog, but...
A very dull dog. Eh, Dounce?
But the story of the effects of the oyster do not quite end there. For now he had returned to it, Mr. Dounce began to realize that an existence run like clockwork was not necessarily what he wanted. He rather liked the idea of taking breakfast whenever he wanted, and drinking a brandy and water in a different hostelry every night. All the same, this notion could so easily have remained no more than a dream, except for one significant recent development.
Good morning, my dear.
Good morning, Mr. D.
Mr. Dounce has recently made the acquaintance of a very charming feminine tobacconist. And though he has lost his taste for oysters, he is now becoming very fond of snuff.
In Love and Oysters, Mr. John Dounce was played by David Calder. Fanny was Samantha Spiro, Harris, David Alistair, and Jones, Joanne Meredith. Rosa was played by Cyril Jenkins, and Dora by Elizabeth Conboy. The voice of Boz was Nicholas Farrell. Sketches by Boz is dramatised by Stephen Wyatt and directed by Sally Avens.